Hello and welcome to coverage of Skirmish 22 for the MSEM format. I'm Caillou, and today we're going to be watching a match between Herzi and BluesEclipse. So since this is a Skirmish, which is our weekly tournaments, which are single elimination, 4 rounds of Swiss, I don't know what the deck lists of each of these players are, because for skirmishes, deck lists are not public. However, having viewed previous rounds, I know that BluesEclipse is on Jund Dark Inscriptions, which is a grindy aggro deck which essentially wants to make use of its titular mechanic, Inscriptions, in order to grind out or the long game or have an explosive turn 3 or not turn 3, but turn 4 kill, essentially. Essentially, Inscriptions are sorceries or instants that you can pay extra to inscribe them onto a creature. What that means is whenever that creature attacks, you copy the inscription from exile and cast it, essentially. So one way to bypass the having to pay extra to inscribe it is a card called Asharo's Handmaiden. It's 1 in a red for a 2/2, but it reads that whenever you cast an inscription spell, you can exile it inscribed onto a creature you control. In fact, it's this very card right here. This is the central card of Blues' deck, and what basically allows the whole thing to function. Because otherwise, all of Blues' cards are very expensive to inscribe, and it doesn't give Blues a way to have like a fast clock. Meanwhile, looking at Herzi's side of the board, tapping for Elixir of Immortality has a black, green, and a blue land here. This looks like it could be Chart Control, which is an old favorite of Herzi's. It's essentially a Sultai control deck which aims to leverage its titular card, Chart the Vast. It basically is a sorcery for 3 blue and a green, which allows you to, I think, look at the top 3 cards of your library, exile a card that doesn't share a mana cost with a card exiled this way, and then you repeat this process until you can no longer exile a card. It's basically just like a draw spell for a huge amount, and it allows you to outgreed mid-range decks while also being able to play control versus most other decks in the field. So Blues is going to play Favor of the Emperor, which allows him to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life, and then has the mana to play Dragon's Ire. Remember that both of these get inscribed to Asharo's Handmaiden, so unless Herzi has an Exint here, Blues essentially attacks him for 4 with the Asharo's Handmaiden, pings Herzi once more, so essentially does 6 damage this whole turn, and then gets to draw 4 cards, which, you know, versus a like a control deck, being able to just have insane amounts of card advantage is kind of where you want to be. Notably, though, Herzi does have a way to recoup the life loss, and in all probability has like some removal for the Asharo's Handmaiden. And so the problem with Blues' deck is that it's very reliant on like keeping around like this one creature whom you've inscribed everything onto. If that creature dies, well, it just ends up being a bad time because you then have to go through the whole process of playing another creature, inscribing a bunch of stuff onto it, and then in that stumbling time, most decks can like stabilize. Herzi, though, is just going to play a Shifting Glade and pass. Again, I think the only instant speed removal spell that Herzi has access to is Exint. And I think if you're Blues, you kind of just don't care. So main one is going to Duress. I think if you're Herzi and you have a counter spell, if you only have one, you counter this one unless you only have one. I'm sorry, unless you have more than one. If you only have one, then just countering it right now makes sense because that way Blues would have grabbed it anyways, and this way Blues doesn't get hand information. However, Herzi tapping out means that everything that Blues does this turn ends up being free. So he's going to Searing Script Herzi's face, and then of course inscribe it onto Asharo's Handmaiden. Importantly, this Autumn Fae, while it doesn't have haste, next turn the prowess triggers will allow it to attack for as a 3/4, so for 6 damage. And right now, Blues is attacking for essentially 7 damage with this Ashara's Handmaiden, because ping 1 with Dragon's Ire, ping 2 with Searing Script, and then gets to like swing in for 4 with Ashara's Handmaiden plus the pump from Dragon's Ire. So yeah, Herzi's down to 5 life. I think even if Herzi gains 5 life with the elixir here, doesn't have a way to not lose next turn. Herzi needs targeted removal for the Ashara's Handmaiden. And yeah, Herzi's just saying game 2. And that's how explosive Blues' deck can be sometimes. Okay, I imagine if you're Herzi, not hitting a Memento Mori or a Fatal Edict, or one of the many ways I think Herzi has to kill creatures, probably feels bitter there. But out of the side, I think you side in all the removal that you can. So we're going into game 2. Herzi starts off turn 1 by just playing a Shock Fetch tapped and passing, because at this point doesn't really need to hold up Exit turn 1 unless Blues has green mana for Quillen Wanderer, and even then can just untap next turn and then Exit at that point. Saving the life total is more important. Blues is just going to play a mountain and then pass. I think grabbing the swamp here makes sense. You want to have access to either Memento Mori, Exit, or Fatal Edict, or all 3. But playing another Shock Fetch tapped and passing. So either Herzi has Exit or doesn't really care about having Memento Mori at instant speed. Doesn't have, because otherwise Herzi has no other interaction here. So Blue's playing Crumbling Precipice. I'm going to tap for another Ashara's Handmaiden. No, Autumn Fae this time. That would have been insane luck if Blues had 2 Ashara's Handmaidens back-to-back in his opener. Autumn Fae is really good, but unlike Ashara's Handmaiden, doesn't circumvent the inscribe cost. So Blues will still have to manually inscribe all of his cards onto Autumn Fae. Meanwhile, on upkeep, Herzi cracks the Shock Fetch, getting Nomad's Township. Interesting fixing for green instead of blue here. Has the island. Okay. Tap 3, 1 and done. Yep, not letting that Autumn Fae stick around. And yeah, I think Herzi just wins this matchup by having removal for Blues' creatures, because Blues has like a small suite of creatures, and if you can kill every one of them, then you just win. Don't really need like wipes or anything. So Blues plays a Shock Fetch tapped, tapping 2 again. Let's see which creature it is this time. Tiernan Pyromancer. Interesting. Herzi is playing a Shock Fetch, but cracking this one. Maybe has Memento Mori plus Arcgen. So it's going to Memento Mori the Tiernan Pyromancer now, and then crack the Arc. Oh no, tapping 4. Oh, for Flesh to Rot. Jesus, okay. Just kills a Tiernan Pyromancer. And I guess prevents Blues from playing any creatures for the next few turns. It's a little excessive, but I guess using it as a removal spell, it's fine in this matchup, since Blues is generally never going to have a board wide enough that Flesh to Rot functions as a wipe, and it's just another way to kill creatures. Okay, so Blue's going to play a Duress here, and Herzi's tapped out, so can't counter it even if they want to. So revealing the titular card, Chart the Vast, Helen Trant, Rock and Roll, and an Ares Pillar. So it's basically just all win cons in Herzi's hand. I think if you're Blues, you have to take the Chart or the Helen, and you have to just hope that Rock doesn't come online. I think, I don't know, because one land away from being able to cast Roll is really scary. Because I think Blues doesn't have anything that can deal with that. But Helen also functions as being able to refill Herzi's hand, as does Chart the Vast. I don't know what's in Blues' hand, but I think if you have more creatures, then I think that you take either Helen or Chart the Vast. If you don't have any creatures left in hand and can't really hope to like race Herzi, probably Roll. So yeah, Blues is going to end up taking Chart the Vast. Notably, oh, that is interesting because that does leave Herzi with a play next turn. If Blues had taken Helen, then Herzi would just have to play the Ares pillar tapped and then not have a play this turn. But yes, is gonna play Helen Trent, probably gonna -2. Yeah, -2. Just gonna draw 2 more cards. Meanwhile, Blues not cracking the Shardstone Rift and also not playing a creature is pretty scary. So has a Searing Script to kill Helen. That does explain why Blues didn't take Helen before. The ability still is on the stack, so Herzi still gets to draw 2 cards. So yeah, on Blues' side, I don't know why Blues isn't cracking the Shock Fetch, because I feel like if your hand doesn't have playables, you want to have less lands, like less lands in your deck to be able to top deck instead of gas. Yeah, he's gonna crack the Shardstone Rift, probably yeah for a basic, so you can turn off both of these pain lands. But then just goes to end. Probably has like all inscriptions, no creatures. Or sorry, probably maybe has creatures, but then doesn't want them dying to Flesh to Rot. Duh. But then that signals that he doesn't have a Shard's Handmaiden, but then instead has Autumn Fae or Tiernan Pyromancer or Quillen Wanderer. All 3 of which have 1 toughness, unlike a Shard's Handmaiden, which is 2/2. So Herzi has another Helen Trent. Just going to draw 2 cards again? Or is Herzi just going to +2 to avoid? No, just going to -2. Herzi does it because card advantage is everything in this matchup. And if Herzi just keeps hitting removal spells, Herzi just keeps winning. And Blues doesn't have a Searing Script in response this time. And Herzi has 6 lands to be able to play roll next turn. And Blues just plays a land and passes. Really need like another Duress or something, but I think this game is over. Because Herzi just untaps, plays a roll. Blues doesn't have anything they can get through roll. And yeah, that just ends the game on the spot. I guess first Herzi's going to +2 Helen and then swing in with her because her +2 turns her into a 4/4 hexproof creature. Oh, and the extra land just to make that 1 more token off of roll. Okay, gonna play Elixir of Immortality first and then go to end? I guess keeping up interaction is okay, but I also think that Herzi just has to know the matchup and know that Blues doesn't have a way around roll, and roll just ends the game next turn. Like if Herzi plays roll this turn, there's no line that Blues has that can stop Herzi from winning next turn. So I don't understand this play. I guess the argument is, oh, you have an inevitability with Helen, it's a 3-turn clock. But then my response to that is like, why not just take a guaranteed win? So Blues tapping 2 for Tiernan Pyromancer. I'm assuming this is not. Oh, it resolves. So then why was Herzi? Then why, if Herzi didn't have interaction, why didn't? If Herzi doesn't play like a Fatal Edict or something in response to each of these, like I don't like. Yeah, in response, Herzi's gonna do something. So yeah, go to Memento Mori. Blues sacks Tiernan Pyromancer. Quillen Wanderer still gets to stick around. So Blues is gonna hard inscribe Dragon's Ire onto this Quillen Wanderer. So in response, I guess Herzi's just gonna counter this. Disallow? Oh, Fatal Edict. Okay. And Fatal Edict is, even though it's 3 mana, it's definitely worth it because it cantrips, so it can replace itself. And Blues, yeah, Blues just concedes. So we're going to a game 3. Okay, so we're getting into game 3. Blues kept at 6. Of course, Herzi, I think, is okay with being on the play for the most part, or sorry, on the draw, because Herzi's deck makes like good use out of the card advantage. And even though Herzi does have counterspells and stuff that do get negatively impacted by being on the draw. I think Herzi can also play like reasonably reactively off of just having edicts. So turn one, Herzi plays Seek Prophecy, which is a cantrip. You look at the top 3 cards of your library, choose one, put it in your hand, put the rest into your grave. Reveals Hell Entrant, a land, and Flesh to Rot, and Snap grabs a Flesh to Rot. I don't blame Herzi because that's a removal spell in this matchup. It's a slow removal spell in this matchup, but it's a removal spell nonetheless. Meanwhile, Blues is going to play Seal the Tomb. So I guess going to Seal the Tomb Helen. Ouch. I think that's one of Herzi's win cons. Okay, so we get to see Herzi's hand. 4 lands, 2 Flesh to Rots, and another Seek Prophecy. That's a pretty good keep. Yeah, that's a reasonable keep. Has Seek Prophecy to like dig for other stuff, and Flesh to Rots are just removal spells here. So I guess notably they're removal spells which also buy Herzi time. In the sense of like you can't play so one of your creatures dies and you can't play a creature for the next 2 turns. So that lets Herzi have time to like draw into win cons or have time to like safely tap out for a chart without having to worry, etc. But yeah, so the Seal of Tomb just exiles all of the Helens in Herzi's deck. So it will be a bit harder to find a win con. However, unlike normal control decks, Herzi's deck is a lot more like win con heavy. It's a lot greedier than normal control decks. So it's not like exiling that will be like, oh no, how will I find a win con now? No, Herzi's pretty content with that, I think. And Blue's just going to end has to feel good for Herzi. You want as much time with Blues not having a creature. So yep, playing the other Seek Prophecy. Hits 2 lands and a Chart the Vast. Yeah, I think since you already have like 3 other lands in hand, snap grab the Chart the Vast. Especially because it helps you find a win con or more removal spells if you need it. Don't think you will. So I think if you're and Blues just passes. Yeah, if you're Blues, like what do you do here? Because you need more hand attack to be able to stop the Flesh to Rot, but Blues just emphatically does not have that. Like I guess what you do is you wait for and yeah, Blues just draws and passes. It doesn't even not even hitting land drops here. But yeah, I guess if you're Blues, you need to be hitting lands here so that you can as you can like play a creature and then inscribe stuff onto it beforehand, or like I guess have Dragon's Ire, multiple Dragon's Ires to keep a creature alive through Flesh to Rots. But yeah, and I think Herzi, unless Herzi has like relevant interaction, next turn Herzi can just tap out for Chart the Vast and just basically win this game by drawing like God knows how many cards. Yeah, Blue's tapping out for Tyranid Pyromancer. Gonna force Herzi next turn to play out the Flesh to Rot, basically. And I think it's like Herzi is like mostly fine with that because again, Herzi has 2 of them. Herzi has more ways to draw cards with Chart the Vast. So, ooh, so it has a Frailty. Interesting. And I mean, it's a removal spell. That works. Just kills the Tyranid Pyromancer without forcing Herzi to tap out for Flesh to Rot. And now has mana potentially for like counter spells or a Fatal Edict if Blues plays on a creature here. So Blues taps 2 for Autumn Fae. It does resolve, interestingly enough. And Blues is tapping 1 more Dragon's Ire? No, Quillen Wanderer. Doing this when you know Herzi has a Flesh to Rot feels like a mistake, because Herzi just untaps next turn, plays Flesh to Rot, and 2-for-1s you. Yep, here comes a Flesh to Rot, and Blues is tapped out, has no way to stop it. Meanwhile, Herzi still has 2 mana up. I don't know that there's anything Herzi can do off of these colors. Could maybe have a Cursory Glance or something. Or on end, just crack. No, I'm just going to save the Elixir. And Blues just draws passes. Herzi with that Ares pillar. Oh, oops, I think that was a mistake. Meant to play Seek Prophecy. So Seek Prophecy resolves. The third one this game. So grabs Chitauri Restoration instead of Memento Mori. I'm really surprised by that, honestly. I guess that means Herzi already has one. But yeah, just playing the Chitauri Restoration. And Ares, I guess what this does is it gives Herzi enough mana to hold up stuff while also having Ares Pillar as a win con. But also, I think when Blues is like struggling on mana, maybe don't give them more mana. I guess Herzi's thought is whatever they can do with the mana, I'm fine with, because Herzi has another Flesh to Rot, but okay. I still think this is a matchup you win by just grabbing as much removal as possible. So I think, I don't know, I feel like unless Herzi has like something really special in hand, I feel like I would have, I guess, has Chart, but like I feel like if I was Herzi, I would have grabbed Memento Mori there. So yeah, Blues just draws and passes. Has no creatures that he can play through a Flesh to Rot on 2. Next turn we'll be able to potentially play Ashar's Handmaiden, but then Herzi has a second Flesh to Rot. So Herzi tapping out 6, is this roll? Oh, tapping 5. So I guess this might be the chart that we saw Herzi. No, it is roll. And I think this just ends the game on the spot. I don't think Blues has any answer to this. And yeah, for 9. Is it 9? Differently named. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's 7. Oh, Snow Cover Island versus Swamp. So I guess Blues does have an answer to roll, which is a kicked Shaldron's Rage. I honestly didn't think that Blues had an answer in any of the 75 because I've never seen a Shaldron's Rage. But yeah, so wow. So roll does just all the roll tokens do just die, and that was on end step too, because Shaldron's Rage is an instant. Herzi still has Chart, and has another Flesh to Rot. And Blues can play an Ashar's Handmaiden here. Doesn't inscribe anything onto it. Can Dragon's Ire in response to a Flesh to Rot in order to save it. Especially if Blues has like double Dragon's Ire. So Herzi's gonna tap 5 for Chart the Vast. Probably hoping to hit an Edict off of here because I think an Edict guarantees killing Ashar's Handmaiden, which is why I think Herzi should have taken the Ashar's Handmaiden. Should have taken the Memento Mori earlier. Oh no, is this a second roll? Jesus. It's a second roll. Oh my god. Here we go again. So now Blues needs another SDR. And can't cast it on end because that would take 4 mana, which Blues doesn't have. It would also kill Blues' own Ashar's Handmaiden. And yeah, Blues just saying GG's. So Herzi on Sultai Chart Control takes a 2-1 over Blues on Jund Dark Inscriptions. Good games to both players.